Whipple Family Misadventures Book 4. It's all so close and yet so far, Chapter 2. Wade was worried. While that wasn't really new, he had always had a penchant for worrying about nearly everything in his life, something that had started long before the boys made their entrance. However, it wasn't currently unwarranted. It had been quite difficult for him to hear that Shadow was struggling with feeling like he didn't belong anywhere, and Wade hadn't even known about it. At least he had spoken up and said something. The worst part was Wade didn't know how to help. What could he do when his alien child came to him in almost tears because the humans that originally had him and subsistently had done awful things to him, who knew nothing about alien hedgehogs? So he had only learned human mannerisms, and now that he was older, he felt that he related better to humans than he did other children of his own species. It broke Wade's heart to see him in such distress, hurting so badly. And there didn't seem to be a clear answer that could help. But Wade knew he couldn't just sit around and do nothing while watching his son suffer in silence. That was the worst part, wanting so badly to help and not having the slightest clue where to start. He wanted Shadow to be more comfortable with who he was, and yet, there didn't seem to be any way to make it happen. While there was no possible chance that Wade would ever send them away, this was one time he kinda wished they had contact with other adult hedgehogs on that planet, so that he could ask for help or advice in this situation. But since that wasn't an option, he would have to work this out another way. Finally, he thought of something. It quite wouldn't solve the problem, but it might help at least a little bit.
Either of you want to watch a movie?
Wade asked the next afternoon.
I found one I think you guys will like.
He said casually, as if this was an accident he stumbled upon and wanted to share and not something he planned. Both of them came bounding into the living room and settled onto the couch eagerly as Wade turned on the Disney movie Tarzan. Besides being a cute and funny movie they would probably enjoy regardless, it had a lot in common with their family. It wasn't exactly the same, but maybe the story of a human who was raised by gorillas and felt like he didn't belong before he finally met other humans would at least create a starting point for the discussion. Shadow seemed to have recovered from the day before, but it was hard to tell with him for how he was feeling. He still kept his emotions pretty close to his chest and struggled with being open about how he felt. Before he said anything, Wade hadn't even been aware that there was a problem. While he was aware that neither would probably ever get to being fully and completely open, Wade hoped they both would feel more comfortable soon, and that it would feel less like yanking teeth to get them to talk about their emotions. While watching, Wade kept sneaking looks at his boys, especially Shadow, trying to gauge their reactions during important scenes. When the movie finished and the credits rolled, Wade shut it off with the remote.
What did you guys think?
Wow! Are there any jungles like that around here?
No, silly. It's too cold for jungles here. It has to be warm year-round for those kinds of plants to grow. But since it gets cold and it snows here, we have different plants and our types of woods.
Oh!
Wade leaned back.
So, did you guys like it?
Frowning, Silver thought for a moment.
I didn't like the bad human Clayton, and I thought the dad gorilla was pretty mean up until the end. But then he was nice before he died. I wish he had stayed alive and been a better dad to Tarzan. Dads are supposed to be nice. And also, I liked the scene where the baby elephant tried to tell his mom something, and he was right, but they didn't believe him.
Wade nodded.
I like that scene too, especially when it showed how sometimes people will want you to do something dangerous just to prove something silly, and it can lead to a lot of bad stuff happening, or someone getting hurt. which is why it's a good idea to stop and think through what the consequences might be before doing something.
It wasn't the lesson he wanted them to learn, but decided to slip it in anyway, before turning towards Shadow.
What did you think?
I don't know.
Silver shot up bright.
You didn't like it?
The darker hedgehog shrugged.
It's a nice movie.
Just nice?
Wade asked gently. When he didn't get an answer, he decided that pushing wasn't a good route to take, and decided to just carry the conversation himself.
I thought it was sad in the beginning when he felt like he didn't belong with his family, and some of the gorillas were mean to him because he was different. And then he felt like he had to work even harder to prove to be something he wasn't.
Out of the corner of his eye, Wade saw a shadow lift his head. Sometimes during the movie, he had slid off the couch and was currently sitting on the floor of the living room. Why? Wade had no idea.
Do you think if they continued the story, Tarzan would be able to be happy with how things turned out? Having both his gorilla family and his human friends being a part of both worlds?
No, he wouldn't fit in with either of them. He's not a gorilla and he looks like a human, but he doesn't know a lot of stuff about humans.
The anguish in his voice was strong, his voice full of edges and angles. Wade nodded solemnly.
That would be rough, especially because it would be hard to fit into the two different worlds. And he would have to switch back and forth because some things that are specifically human wouldn't be welcome in the gorilla world.
A look of confusion came over Silver's face as he stared at his brother, suddenly understanding what this conversation was about.
Do you feel different?
Shadow looked down.
Sometimes. Do you?
Sometimes.
Wade tilted his head to the left slightly. That wasn't something he had ever considered.
You want to talk about it?
He asked, looking at Silver. When he didn't get a response, Wade shifted his stance to a more comfortable position.
It's alright if you don't want to, but sometimes it helps to talk. It gets it off your chest and can be helpful for others as well. And there are times that other people feel the exact same way, but they don't even know it because it's never been said out loud.
Silver blew out a long sigh.
Okay.
He finally said and held up one hand to his face as it lit up with that sighing glow that offset his features.
When I first found out about my psychokinesis, a lot of the other kids didn't like it. I think it scared them, how I could move stuff with my mind. Maybe they thought I would do bad stuff with it or something. I've never met anyone else who has psychokinesis like me, and they made me leap because they...
How old were you when this happened?
7.
Shocked, Wade frowned, really hoping he heard that wrong.
You were forced to try and survive by yourself without any help at only 7 years old? Because they didn't like your psychokinesis?
When the gray hedgehog nodded, Wade felt an overwhelming urge to go find those kids who did that to him. He couldn't imagine that happening, especially to such a little kid.
I'm glad you survived.
Wade said slowly, still barely believing what he was hearing.
That must have been awful, all by yourself.
Yeah, I was sad and mad and hurt when they did that. I wanted friends more than I wanted psychokinesis. I wanted to stay with them and be safe, but they wouldn't let me, so I was alone for a long time. Until I came here. I tried to pretend I didn't have it for a bit, but it was useful to survive, and I started practicing. But now I got both psychokinesis and friends, and no one's afraid of me, I think.
Shadow leaned towards him.
I don't think it's scary. I think it's cool.
The smile that came over Silver's face couldn't have been brighter if he tried.
Thanks. I think it's pretty cool too, but I used to think it was bad. I'm glad I didn't find a way to get rid of it. How come you feel different? You don't have powers?
From his fall on the floor, Shadow seemed to curl in on himself, hunching his shoulders as if to become smaller. Seeing the moment where Shadow looked like he was about to get lost in the anguish of his own mind, Wade decided to take some pressure off him.
I felt different before. Maybe not quite to the extent that you two have, but it's something a lot of people can relate to. Everyone wants to fit in, not stand out. Especially because sometimes people treat someone who is different like they're a freak of nature, and like they're a bad thing.
Like my psychokinesis?
Yes, like your psychokinesis, those other kids didn't understand it, and it scared them. So they made you leave because that was the only way they could deal with it, which was wrong and also pretty mean. There are a lot of better ways to handle it, like coming to understand it. When you learn about something that's different, it's no longer scary.
Suddenly, Shadow spoke.
I feel different because I don't know much.
Silver tilted his head to the left.
I don't know much either. There's a lot of confusing stuff here on this planet. It's so confusing sometimes. Humans are really weird sometimes. But not you, Dad.
In spite of himself, Wade smiled.
I'll make sure to try harder to be.
Not that. Besides that, I don't know anything about being a hedgehog. Literally nothing, because there weren't any around when I was young. And I don't.
And it makes you feel bad?
He asked, even though he already knew the answer. There was a tiny nod.
I don't like being the only one who doesn't know much about human stuff or hedgehog stuff. So I don't belong with either.
How come you didn't grow up with others like us?
Shadow ducked his head again.
I wasn't on the same planet as you guys. I was with the professor, that guy I originally wanted to come get me. And other humans were there too, but mostly him. There weren't any other hedgehogs or anyone else besides humans and me. And then I got away, and was in the ocean, and walked for a long time until I saw Sonic one day, and followed him here, to this town, and spied on people sometimes. And then I met you and Dad.
Silver didn't have anything to say to that, his shoulders and quills drooping as he bit his lip, then looked up at Wade again, as if asking for help, because he didn't know how to respond. Carefully and only taking a moment to lament the loss of sitting comfortably, Wade gently lowered himself off of the chair and onto the floor next to Shadow. He still didn't know why the hedgehog had chosen to sit by himself on the floor, but Wade didn't want him to feel alone down there.
Maybe there's something that can be done to help you.
How? You can't change what's already happened.
No, but you're not the only hedgehog here. And like we saw in the movie, you saw what Jane and her dad did when they realized Tarzan didn't know anything about humans. They wanted to help him, and then they taught him everything about humans. Maybe that can be done for you. We're already doing it with a lot of things.
Shadow frowned, considering that.
Yeah, me and Sonic could teach you stuff. I could think of plenty of stuff that would be helpful for you to learn. It's what I learned when I was with all that humans don't know or use.
Would that help?
Wade nodded, glad that Silver had jumped on the idea.
I think it would.
He reached out, putting his hand on Shadow's shoulder.
I really think it would go a long way in helping you feel better.
Not for the first time, Wade was glad there were multiple of them, so none felt completely alone. This would have been a lot more difficult if they didn't have each other.
Maybe.
You don't want to?
Tugging on his gloves, Shadow didn't say anything for several seconds.
I'm worried I won't be able to do it.
Can't do what?
Anything.
Shadow hid his face in his hands.
Since I didn't learn it as a baby, it's too late to learn now, and I would just look stupid trying.
Wade frowned sympathetically.
It's not going to be like that, buddy.
He said, offering a hug. A moment later, Shadow curled up next to him, and Wade put his arms around him. He never wanted to pass up an opportunity for either of them to know how much they were loved and deeply cared about.
There's no rule that says you can only learn things at a certain age, and then chances go away for good.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Wade said as Silver came to his other side and tucked him against him.
I think you should at least give it a chance, especially because it might work.
Hey Dad, in that movie, when his mom said when Tarzan was upset about being different, do you think that goes for us too?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking, Betty.
You're different from us, or we're different from you. Even as a family, that's okay, right? To be different and not the same?
Yeah, that's okay. Families don't have to match. There might be people in the future might think this situation is weird or strange, but honestly, who cares what they think? I'm only concerned about what you guys think. And as long as you're both happy and feel like you're being cared for, then everyone else can go kick rocks. I know there are differences. You two are hedgehogs, and I'm not. and nothing is going to change that. I'll never know what it's like to have quills or a tail. But I think that when it comes to the important stuff, like making sure you both have proper care and feel safe and loved and wanted, then it doesn't matter if I'm a hedgehog or not. We're similar enough that the rest doesn't matter.
What if it does matter someday?
Then we'll figure it out together.
Wade promised, stroking his ears. He knew that this wasn't a full solution to the problem, but hoped it would help and give his son the peace he deserved.